We live in a world overflowing with information, yet we often find ourselves afraid to ask questions. We're terrified of being judged, of appearing stupid. But why is this so? Are we undermining ourselves? Or is this a construct born out of an education system that discourages critical thought? We fear being tagged as low-effort seekers, opting for the easiest route like Google. But can Google always provide the most accurate answers? Or is it tainted by SEO and the highest bidder? There's an extraordinary aspect about this scenario that is fascinatingly profound. But alas, you'll have to wait a bit longer to find out what that is. Hey there, curiosity explorers, ready for another dive into the unknown? I'm your host, Caesar, and joining me today, as always, is our deep diving co-host, Sonia.
Hello, fellow curiosity seekers, ready for another journey into the great beyond of knowledge?
If you're new here, consider hitting that subscribe button, and don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're enjoying our podcast, please share it with your friends. Let's unearth the mysteries of the world together. So, let's delve into this concept of a low-effort question. What does it even mean? Well, it's often a question that people perceive as too simple, one that could be answered with a quick Google search or by reading a book or a documentary. And surprisingly, despite having a sea of resources at our fingertips in this 21st century, we still find ourselves asking each other these so-called low-effort questions. I'm sure many of you can relate to this. The fear of judgment, the worry that your question might come across as, let's be frank, stupid. It's this fear that prevents us from approaching someone we respect to ask our burning questions. The fear that they might just belittle our question, dismiss it as unoriginal, or simply tell us to go read this or go watch that. And the truth is, these are all assumptions, often unfounded, but they hold power. They make us feel less than vulnerable. We feel like we're at the mercy of this person who now holds the power to react however they wish to our supposed ignorance. And often, this fear becomes so overwhelming that we don't even muster the courage to approach an expert. But at the heart of it, isn't it all about fear? Fear of feeling less, fear of vulnerability, fear of judgment. It's this fear that creates a chasm between our curiosity and the answers that lie just within reach. So, where does this fear come from, and how do we overcome it? Well, that's a question we'll answer soon enough. But first, I'm curious. What do you think? Continuing our discussion on low-effort questions, it's interesting to note how our reactions to such questions might vary depending on our age. Imagine for a moment a young child asking what seems to be a simple question, something like, "What is a cup?" Now, if an adult asked the same question, we might laugh, maybe even mock them for asking something so obvious. But why exactly is that? As adults, we've been trained to view our world in a utilitarian way. So if someone asks us what a cup is, we immediately think of its use, a container from which we drink. But perhaps the person asking the question was not looking for a utilitarian answer. Maybe they wanted to explore the concept of a cup in more detail. Maybe they were interested in the history of the cup, or they were curious about how it came to be such a common item in our daily lives.
That's a fascinating perspective. It makes me wonder whether our education system is somehow responsible for this narrow viewpoint. Are we trained to suppress our curiosity, to stop asking why, how, and where because it's not beneficial for those in power if we learn to think critically?
It's a thought-provoking question, isn't it? And I believe it's not entirely far-fetched. To some extent, our education system does encourage us to accept a predetermined set of answers rather than promoting critical thinking and curiosity.
So in a sense, it's fear that holds us back from asking these so-called low-effort questions. But it's also a learned behavior, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's where the challenge lies, to unlearn these behaviors and to embrace our natural curiosity, just like we did when we were kids. To ask questions without fear of judgment or ridicule. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what learning is all about? So let's circle back to our question. What is a cup? On face value, it might seem nonsensical, given that most adults are familiar with the utilitarian meaning of a cup. But let's consider it from a different angle.
You mean to say that there's more to a cup than just being a drinking vessel?
Exactly. In fact, if we look at definitions from various dictionaries, they all give surprisingly vague descriptions of a cup, basically describing it as an open, usually bowl-shaped drinking vessel.
That's true, I suppose. We do tend to use cups and glasses interchangeably in certain contexts. For instance, we ask for a glass of wine at a restaurant, not a cup of wine.
Right. And that's where the crux of the matter lies. Our default reaction to such a question is to ridicule it, to dismiss it as stupid. But doing so only inhibits critical thinking, which is something we should be encouraging, not stifling.
That's a valid point. You're saying that we should consider the deeper implications of these low-effort questions rather than instantly dismissing them as absurd.
Absolutely. The moment we stop ridiculing and start thinking critically, that's when learning truly comes alive.
And I guess there's no such thing as a stupid question in that case. It's all about the perspective and the intent behind the question.
Precisely. It's not about the question itself, but the mindset with which we approach it. It's about staying curious and open-minded, not letting fear or judgment inhibit our quest for knowledge. So, to elaborate on the concept of a cup, we need to acknowledge that it's largely culture-dependent. For instance, at a Japanese restaurant, if you order sake, which is a type of rice wine, you'll be served in a porcelain bowl-shaped container, which, to Western eyes, resembles a cup.
So you're saying a glass of sake is actually a cup of sake due to the way it's traditionally served?
Precisely. And if we look at it from that perspective, we see that the lines between a cup and a glass begin to blur. So, what defines a cup or a glass? Is it the material, the shape, or is it, as we're finding out, simply a matter of cultural context and usage?
That's fascinating. So the term cup is more arbitrary than most of us might have thought. It's not something set in stone, but rather something that's been collectively adopted across different cultures for specific uses.
Exactly. And it's interesting to note that while we've decided cups are for hot beverages, there are exceptions. Take Ireland, for instance, where hot whiskey is served in a glass.
So examining this question of what is a cup really does involve a lot of thinking out of the box, doesn't it?
It does. And it's not always about coming up with novel possibilities. Sometimes it's simply about challenging our assumptions and being willing to see things from a different perspective.
And through this exploration, we're not just learning about cups, but also about different cultures and their unique traditions. So, in a way, asking a low-effort question can sometimes lead to high-effort thinking and learning.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of it. A simple question can lead to profound insights if we're open to exploring it fully. Now let's consider the role of tradition and close-mindedness in our understanding of these concepts. When we talk about thinking out of the box, it isn't just an intellectual exercise for the elite. Sometimes it's as simple as asking someone from another culture their perspective on a seemingly mundane object.
It sounds like you're suggesting that close-mindedness isn't just about ignorance. It's also about a sort of internalized colonialism, a perspective that's been passed down through our education system.
Exactly. And herein lies the problem. Sometimes people ask low-effort questions not because they're genuinely curious, but because they are genuinely ignorant about the basics. And yes, they could have just Googled the answer, but that brings us to another issue. Who controls the content that we see first on a Google search?
You mean, with search engine optimization and all that, the results we see are often influenced by whoever paid the most to be there?
That's right. Let's imagine a library where the books you can access are in a predetermined order, according to who paid the most to be seen first. The first few options you'd see might not be the most relevant or helpful, but they're what's presented to you because someone paid for that visibility.
So it's not just about knowing what to ask, but also about having the critical thinking skills to discern the quality of information you're given.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, that's a skill that not everyone has. So before we write off someone's question as stupid or low effort, let's consider the larger context. There's a tendency, I think, to dismiss people who ask low-effort questions as being lazy or not serious about learning, but that can be a rather self-centered perspective. Not everyone who asks a question has the same resources or background knowledge, and they might be genuinely overwhelmed.
So you're saying that instead of brushing them off, we should maybe try to guide them towards relevant resources.
Exactly. In academia, for instance, students have supervisors who suggest the best resources. Why not extend the same courtesy to someone asking a question on the internet?
That's a good point. And I guess that approach also encourages a more inclusive and diverse conversation.
Indeed. I've found that some of the best conversations I've had were with people who ask those so-called low-effort questions. Their perspectives can offer surprising insights. Now, I'm curious, dear listeners, have you ever had a similar experience where asking a simple question opened up a wide and fascinating world of knowledge? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
And while you're at it, don't forget to hit the like button if you're enjoying this episode. Your support means a lot to us and helps us to continue bringing you these deep dives into the world of curiosities.
It's interesting to note that the people who ask these questions are often enthusiastic, open-minded, and even come up with hypotheses that make us think in new ways. They're eager to listen and learn.
And that stands in stark contrast to those who dismiss them, who might be holding on to a very fixed idea of their own knowledge and therefore less open to learning something new.
Exactly. It seems to me that this isn't so much about intelligence or ignorance as it is about humility. Being willing to ask questions and seek answers, even if they might seem simple or low effort, shows a willingness to learn and understand. That's a quality to be admired.
It's certainly a refreshing perspective. Asking questions, after all, is at the core of learning, and there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely. It's a reminder to us all to approach our curiosities with humility and a desire to learn, no matter how much we think we already know, because there's always more to discover. So to wrap everything up, tonight's episode brought to the surface the notion that asking questions, even those deemed as low effort, is an essential part of learning and curiosity. It's not about being lazy or ignorant, it's about humility and the desire to learn more.
To be truly open to learning, we need to set aside our fears of judgment and remember that every question we ask, no matter how simple it may seem, has the potential to expand our knowledge and perspective.
Can you imagine if we all approached the world with the same curiosity and fearlessness as a child, asking questions without fear of judgment? Now that's food for thought.
Absolutely. So, dear listeners, the next time you have a question, don't shy away from asking it, no matter how simple or low effort it may seem. Who knows? It may lead to some interesting conversations.
And remember, folks, there's no such thing as a stupid question, only the ones left unasked.
Well said, Caesar. Before we wrap up the episode, we want to thank you, our audience, for joining us tonight. If you enjoyed this episode, please blast that like button, leave us a comment with your thoughts, and share this episode with your friends. Your support helps us continue to bring you these deep dives into the world of curiosities.
We're always here, ready to explore and unravel the mysteries of the world with you. Until next time, stay curious and keep asking those questions.
Goodbye, everyone, and until next time, keep your minds open and your curiosities alive.
Our exploration today was based on an enlightening piece titled, "What is a Low-Effort Question, and Does It Matter?" by Lucy the Diviner, which was published on the Medium site on December 20th, 2023. If you want to delve deeper into the subject, the full URL is available in our episode description. Now it's time for me to sign off. Until our next curiosity.